And thanks to all our friends on the 5. Welcome to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. We are following 3 major breaking news stories tonight. A massive terror attack in Spain. A van was used to viciously mow down and murder innocent people in a crowded shopping area. This is in Barcelona, Spain. We have the chilling video tonight. It is just horrific. So far, 13 are dead. Over 100 injured in what police are calling a terrorist attack. President Trump tonight saying the U.S. will do whatever is necessary to help. And also tonight, according to a brand new report, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, he tells Republican Congressman of California, Dana Rohrabacher, that he has proof the DNC documents that he published did not come from Russia. One guy that would know for sure. Could this potentially blow the entire Russia collusion narrative completely out of the water? The Hill's John Solomon. He will have all those explosive details exclusively tonight. And the left, they continue to just melt down over President Trump's response to Charlottesville. A Democratic state senator is under fire tonight after hoping the president gets assassinated and is refusing tonight to apologize. We need a resignation and a Secret Service investigation. Also, the left rushing to remove Confederate symbols from all across the country. It's a busy, major breaking news night tonight on Hannity. This is our opening monologue. An absolutely shocking scene took place earlier today in a busy tourist town area of Barcelona, Spain. A van plowing onto a sidewalk swerved side to side, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction. Now, we do have a viewer warning. We are about to show you very, very graphic video of the scene immediately after this tragic attack. Now, if children are in the room, you may want to have them look away. Take a look. As you just saw, complete chaos, body, debris all over the place. Tonight, ISIS claiming responsibility. Police have arrested 2 suspects, a Spanish national and a person from nearby Morocco. The driver of the van still at large. We'll have a full report in just a minute. And also tonight, the Associated Press is reporting that Spanish police say they have killed 4 suspects in what is being described as a separate alleged terror plot just south of Barcelona. And also tonight, in an exclusive report from the Hill's John Solomon, who will be here coming up later, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange told Republican Congressman from California, Dana Rohrabacher, that he has evidence to prove that the emails that he published about the DNC never came from Russia. The U.S. intelligence community, now they said they have different evidence. They have yet to release any of it to the public. But if Assange can back up this claim, and we'll have this report, it would blow a huge hole in an 11-plus month narrative of Russia collusion, a conspiracy theory without evidence. The Democrats, the destroyed Trump media, have been pushing now month after month. Now, what Assange is saying now is exactly the same thing he told me on this show when I interviewed him back in January at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Take a quick look. Did Russia give you this information or anybody associated with Russia?
Our source is not a state party. So the answer for our interactions is no.
You did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails. Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
Now keep in mind, WikiLeaks has never been wrong once in 11 years of publishing. So the special counsel tonight, Robert Mueller, should be getting on a plane and going to meet with Assange to find out if, in fact, he has this evidence and is telling the world the truth. If he wants to get to the truth, he owes this to the American people. He owes it to the president. And Congress now should immediately open an investigation. This is the one guy we know who has the information. He's the one that put it up. We'll have more later tonight with John Solomon. And finally tonight, the left still in a complete and utter meltdown over the tragedy in Charlottesville and, of course, the president's response. We have shown you over and over and over again on this program how President Trump has repeatedly condemned white supremacists, the KKK, David Duke, over the years and in Charlottesville. He denounced these people over the course of decades. But the left, the media, they still refuse to accept it. And now tonight, the rhetoric has gotten much worse. Here's a perfect example. A Democratic state senator from Missouri, apparently so enraged with the president, she posts a comment on Facebook hoping for President Trump's assassination after facing backlash over her vile comment. Okay, she said she regrets it. She refused to apologize. I hope the Secret Service is watching. Watch this.
It was inappropriate. I've said that 3 times now. And
are you apologizing for it?
No. When the president apologizes for what he says, I'll apologize.
So
but
you go as far to say your statement was inappropriate.
Yes.
You're not apologizing.
It was inappropriate. It was wrong. I posted it to my personal Facebook page, and I deleted it.
But you're not apologizing.
No.
And frankly, she should be removed from the Senate and arrested. This is disgusting, and it shows you the level of out-of-control hate that is spewing, yes, from the alt-left in this country. There's also Virginia's Democratic Governor, Terry McAuliffe. According to a new report, well, he may have actually lied about the white supremacists storing weapons all around Charlottesville. Police are saying tonight it never happened. Democrats and the left, they have, as I've been saying, they're using this tragedy in Charlottesville to call for the removal also of Confederate statues, symbols all across the country. And earlier today, the president warned this could be a very slippery slope. He tweeted out, "Sad to see the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of our beautiful statues and monuments. You can't change history, but you can learn from it." Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson's. Who's next? Washington? Jefferson? So foolish. Also, the beauty that is being taken out of our cities and towns and parks will be greatly missed and never able to be comparably replaced. According to a new poll tonight, 62% of Americans do agree with him now that these pieces of American history should in fact be left. But Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Senator Cory Booker are all saying that all Confederate statues should be removed from the U.S. Capitol. Wait till we show you what Al Sharpton is saying tonight. Now, what we're seeing play out here in the aftermath of Charlottesville in the media with the Democrats, they are politicizing a terrible, horrible incident by, yes, evil people. Yes, white supremacists are evil. They have completely ignored the facts, and they are trying to politically bludgeon President Trump, conservatives and Republicans, and paint them unfairly as racist and bigots. But here's what they won't tell you. Democrats, as I pointed out in great detail last night, have a very disturbing history when it does come to race. It was Southern Democrats who voted against the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act, including the person Bill Clinton has praised many times as his mentor, J. William Fulbright. Hillary Clinton's mentor, former Klansman, former head of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate not that long ago, Robert Byrd, Al Gore's father, Al Gore Sr. He voted against the Civil Rights Act. Republicans, they're the party of Lincoln. Democrats have been the party of slavery and segregation. They've also ignored how President Obama had stoked racial divisions. He rushed to judgment in 4 specific high-profile race cases: Cambridge, Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, what happened in Baltimore, and Ferguson, Missouri. And he also praised anti-police groups like Black Lives Matter, even invited the head of Black Lives Matter to the White House after, what do we want dead cops, when do we want it now? Where was the media backlash over all of that? Why would a sitting president do that? And what we're seeing now is the media, the Democrats, they're just playing the race card, just like they do politically every 2 and 4 years, as we showed you that history last night. And when it comes to Confederate statutes and symbols, well, I think the president is right. Local communities and states, they have the right to decide. Here's my advice. Republicans in the House and Senate, it's time to work for the forgotten men and women of this country, okay? Get tax reform done. Get energy independence done. Create jobs, build the wall, chip away at Obamacare for 7.5 years that you said you repeal and replace. Let's work on the economy first. Let's help those Americans in poverty on food stamps and out of the labor force. Otherwise, Republicans in the House and Senate, you're going to lose in 2018. So let's not the media and the Democrats direct the direction of the country here. With Reaction, joining us, the host, Michelle Malkin Investigates on CRTV. Michelle Malkin, all right, let's respond to the whole picture here with, first of all, I want to get to the terrorism story. I'm going to play the images again to warn parents that may have kids in the room. We see the carnage, we see the viciousness, we see the evil, and it is spread all the way through, all throughout Europe, and it is connected to a lack of assimilation. We have Sharia courts in Great Britain, and also a huge influx of migrants and zero vetting process. Is that why it's so bad in Europe, and is that a preview of coming attractions here?
It is, and it's been the progressive left, the open borders lobby that has done everything in its power to fight President Trump, who's trying to make sure that we don't have Madrid-style bombings and more vehicular jihad attacks like this on our shores. And what do? Exactly what you've been talking about all week long, Sean, which is play the race card, not only to demonize personally their political opponents, but to obstruct them from achieving our most basic goals of government in ensuring our sovereignty and the safety of our people.
All right, I want to stay on this terror issue for just a second, because I don't think you can defeat an enemy, Michelle, if you don't identify an enemy. And for 8 years, we wouldn't identify an enemy. And listen, we can cast aspersions and blame all we want here. But if the world doesn't wise up, how bad is this going to get? And if the president doesn't secure the border, if he doesn't get his vetting proposal through, what does that mean for the American people?
Well, it's a disaster worldwide, of course. And what you have in so many of these European countries is not just apathy anymore, but the sense that the London mayor himself, I think a paragon and textbook example of dimitude, in other words, capitulation to Islamic extremism and Islamic supremacy, if you want to use a word that's been overused and not really truly appreciated in the context of jihad, basically capitulating and saying, well, we just got to accept this as an everyday part of life. No, that was not the attitude of people here in America in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. It wasn't the attitude of the people on the plane who embraced the slogan that we have all forgotten since then with the snooze alarm, let's roll. No, what you have now around the world are people who are accepting Islamic terrorism as a fact of life and who have just given in. It's no longer let's roll, it's let's roll over. And finally, we have a commander-in-chief who does not accept that as a reality. And all we get is this constant drubbing from the baying hounds of the partisan enablers of jihad, the partisan enablers of division in this country, who will not accept that we must, as you said, Sean, name the enemy and do everything in our power. It is the fundamental duty of government to stop these people from getting into our country and kicking them out when we find them.
I've identified on this program 5 forces that are up against this president, and they are real, and week after week and month after month, it seems like it's consuming way too much of the president's time. That's the deep state. That's the unmasking. That's the surveillance. That's the leaking, especially as we go back into the last election year and beyond. We're going to have a report on Julian Assange, the one guy that knows where that information came from, and he's saying he's got the proof. All right. Let's call him out. Mueller ought to go there. The Congress ought to investigate. But so you got Democrats. They don't want to help the president. You got the media. They're out to destroy the president. I mean, look, the president says how many times he's against racism. He disavows it, finds it repugnant. He used the word evil, and it's still not enough. He didn't identify them by name on Saturday, but he did over the years again and again and again and all throughout the election, even back in 2000, and he said his entire life. That's not enough. So you got these deep forces, deep state, you got Democrats, you got the media, then you got Republicans. They can't even get a simple piece of agenda passed. They don't have any backbone to support him. And never Trumpers are like giddy because they want to tell everybody, I told you so, see, because they want to be proven right. How do you govern when it consumes 65, 75% of your time?
I think it is extraordinarily unprecedented, the forces that this president is up against, and that constant drumbeat, as I said, those baying hounds. Every one of those groups that you mentioned, Sean, has its own special interest and agenda in bringing this country, this president, and along with it, this country down. And that agenda has to be illuminated. Here they all were demanding disavowals. And as you said, it's never enough for these people. It has never been enough. And it has always been the strategy of the progressive left and the media enablers and the Republican traitors as well to tar people who believe in immigration enforcement and, yes, making America great again as racist, xenophobe, the true anti-American forces in this country.
Yeah, by the way, we just got this coming across our wires. A fifth suspect has been killed in the terror incident south of Barcelona. Remember, ISIS, Islamic radicals, they often cluster attacks 1, 2, 3 at a time. It's not uncommon. We saw it on 9/11. But I want to ask, with the Republicans, forget about how they feel about the president or what disagreements they have. These are their promises on tax cuts for the middle class, tax cuts for corporations, repatriation of money. It's their promise on energy independence. They have a duty to protect the border and get a lot of these things done and create jobs for people and get them out of poverty and off of food stamps. Why don't they just do it because it's what they said? Never mind whatever the president. It seems that there's agreement there and they can't meet in the middle.
I agree with you, and we've seen this fecklessness from the GOP establishment for so long now. It's been ever more frustrating. I believed that during the Tea Party years that things were really going to change, and then we still ended up with Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. Of course, if you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, you are just subjecting yourself to the same kind of Beltway swamp insanity that we have suffered for so long. Now there's an opportunity for people, for example, in Arizona to make a change after so many years. Why don't you do it? In the end, I think this really goes back to the voters. You get what you voted for. And it's time that people understand that we've made a change here in the White House, and we should have new, fresh blood in quote-unquote leadership in the GOP.
I went through a history in very great detail tonight. I gave more of a summary Cliff Note version tonight about the Democratic Party and race. Hillary Clinton's mentor is a former Klansman. Bill Clinton's mentor was a known segregationist, voted against the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. Al Gore's father was part of it. Robert Byrd, filibustered this thing for months, as we remember. And we're watching this whole narrative unfold in Charlottesville. I mentioned the president has a history of condemning, disavowing. The media never mentions that. And their only thing is, well, he didn't say the group fast enough, even though he said it repeatedly over the years. And I want to get your reaction to that and the reaction of Democrats now saying all Confederate symbols of any kind in history must be removed. What's your reaction to that?
Well, this is about the whitewashing of history by progressive leftists. It bubbled up first on campuses where you saw militant Black Lives Matters activists and other social justice warriors try to tear down every last statue. And now it has spread across the country. We had a statue of Lincoln that was defaced in Chicago. You've got people in Philadelphia.
We have a picture of it, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go.
We have that
disgrace.
image, yeah.
And that's what we've come to. And so everybody's piling on with their special interests. For some reason in Philadelphia, people are trying to tear down a statue of the former mayor there, Frank Rizzo. What is going on here? And I absolutely agree with President Trump that you don't whitewash history. You confront it.
So then here's my question. Yeah, yes. We're watching. This is in Durham. This is when they pulled down this statute. Only one person finally got arrested on that. And I'm all in favor of letting local community...
Right, a supporter of North Korea and communism, by the way.
Right. All right. But here's my question for you. And I know the president, he likes to make points. Should the president just be focused on his agenda and stay out of these battles like this? Because with the media and with Democrats, you can never win. You can't have an intellectual discussion. Is he better off just focusing on the tax cuts, the economy, people in poverty, on food stamps, out of the labor force?
I think that he can do both, because I actually think, especially living outside of the Beltway and coastal bubbles for almost 10 years now, I absolutely think that his message is getting through to ordinary, decent people, informed people, people who understand the ramifications of history in this regard. And I also believe it is very effective, Sean, not only for you and the supporters of President Trump to turn the race card back and smack that race card over the heads figuratively, of the progressive left, because somebody has to push back. This is why President Trump was elected, and you can't change that. And I think that's what you see. I believe that is an admirable thing, that he's not going to let himself be pushed around and be labeled as a racist or supremacist by people who embrace Planned Parenthood. You want to take down a statue? How about the sculpture of Margaret Sanger, the godmother of the abortion movement, who was a champion of the worst and most evil kind of eugenics? Why don't you start with that?
Statues, there's a statue in the West Virginia State House of Robert Byrd. Take that down, too.
There you go.
There are 56 schools, highways, buildings named after former Klansman Byrd. Should they all come down? Hillary Clinton's mentor, is she going to lead that effort?
Yeah, that's right. What are we going to be left with? And, you know, it was President Trump just earlier this week who said, what's next, George Washington? And I saw all the tittering and the sneering from all the people in the Beltway swamp. Oh, that's so ridiculous. And now we've got people who want to tear down the Jefferson Memorial. He was right.
Yeah, well, he is. I mean, now they want to defund it with tax dollars, but that would only be the first step. And you mentioned I saw the defaced image of Lincoln, but we don't know if that happened in this time period or maybe before, and there's some questions and there's some issues here. We're going to have John Solomon on in a second. And actually, we're going to have to let you go. I see Michelle. Michelle Malkin, it's always good to see you. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you. It's been too long.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. Thank you. And as we mentioned in my opening monologue, Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher says he met with Julian Assange earlier this week, claims that the meeting went on over 3 hours, and Assange says he's the one guy that would know he can prove Russia did not give WikiLeaks the DNC emails. He joins us now with reaction, the executive vice president of The Hill, John Solomon. John, I played this at the beginning of the show. Julian Assange told me this on radio at least 4 times. I asked him very specifically again and again. He told me on this show, very specifically, it was not Russia, it was not a state. Tell us what you got.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that happened in the last 24 hours is that Julian Assange reached out to an American official and basically signaled he's open to a deal. He's open to talking. He's open to possibly telling us how he can prove that Russia didn't give him the documents, and that might add some new information to an investigation that has already had some conclusions to it. But there's a lot of uncertainty about certain aspects of this case yet, and I think he's signaling with the right deal he might be able to talk about where he got the documents. That's I really think the news here. I think his insistence he didn't get it from Russia we've known for a long time.
This is important because wasn't the original directive from the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein to look into potential Trump-Russia collusion? And wasn't the whole narrative about whether or not the Russians were responsible for the leaks to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and the impact in the campaign and Trump collusion? Doesn't Robert Mueller have an obligation to get to this question answered? There is one guy in the world that probably knows more than anybody else where it came from, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things we don't know, right? The embassy that Julian Assange is holed up in London could be very well monitored by the United States, and they may already know everything they need to know about Assange. It's possible that Assange has some information that's entirely new. It's also possible that the intelligence community could be right that certain things were hacked by Russia, and Julian Assange got them from a different source of people who had nothing to do with Russia. I think the fact that we don't know those answers, that there's some ambiguity here, certainly makes a good case that somebody should go talk and try to get the evidence to clear up these issues.
And that would include Congress, because they have investigative powers. And considering it has now consumed the attention of the American people for 11 months, and that the intelligence community's never offered the American people any evidence, have they?
They haven't, no, because they say it's classified, and I think we have to respect that that's probably true, that they're monitoring and listening and how they came to certain conclusions. Probably is a classified thing. We don't need to spill all those out there. But somebody, many times in counterintelligence investigations, what happens is the initial assessment changes. You make an early assessment, you learn new things. Let's take, for instance, the intelligence about the Iraq war. That changed, right? Let's talk about times where the intelligence community made assessments about
John, I hate to interrupt you. Stay right there. We're going to have more with The Hill's John Solomon on his explosive report. Julian Assange now meeting with Dana Rohrabacher, claiming he has the evidence. It was not Russia. They did not give him the DNC emails. We'll continue our investigation and asking the tough questions. All of that, plus the very latest on the Barcelona terror attack and much more straight ahead. Russia give you this information or anybody associated with Russia?
Our source is not a state party. So the answer for our interactions is no.
You did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails. Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
That was WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange on this program back in January, saying and denying that Russia had anything to do with giving WikiLeaks the hacked Democratic emails during the 2016 election. Now, this is important as we continue with the executive vice president of The Hill, John Solomon. I've interviewed him, as I said, 4 times on radio. I've interviewed him once on television. And here's an interesting sidebar. Whether you like WikiLeaks or not, and I know that at times Democrats liked him, at times Republicans liked him. But here's a guy that hacked into the DOD and NASA when he was 16. I think he's now 45. Now, at some point, we've got to say, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. Now, shame on America for not building the cybersecurity that they should have. And so there's a lot of angry people, which I understand.
Sure.
But they also have a responsibility. But 11 years, WikiLeaks has never gotten it wrong. So Rohrabacher, the congressman from California, meets with him.
Right.
And Julian is saying he's got the proof it wasn't Russia. And he would be the one guy, I think, in the whole world that would know more than anybody. So here's the question. Rohrabacher now has a message for the president. What did he tell you about that?
He said that he has some non-public information that Julian Assange gave him that he's going to take back to the president. He also had a request from Assange, which he was willing to talk about, which is Assange would like WikiLeaks to have a seat in the White House press corps. So there's a little horse trading going on in these negotiations.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing Julian Assange signal that he might be open to do some sort of deal. The question is the American government, is the Congress interested in doing such a deal with a guy who has brought a lot of harm to national intelligence sources from the information he's released? He's not a hero in the intelligence community, that's for sure.
I know he's not a hero in the intelligence community, but again, I go back to, at some point, well, we saw how corrupt Hillary Clinton was. We learned an awful lot about what happened to Bernie Sanders, didn't we, in that whole mess? That Bernie, that primary was rigged. There was a story with Debbie Wasserman Schultz because he got fired on the eve of the Democratic National Convention, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, listen, there's 3 things that Julian Assange over the last 10 years has brought to light. One, how penetrable our supposedly secure systems in government were, how easy it was to hack. 2, how much surveillance was going on of Americans that no one really knew about,
how
much more
Hillary is.
And then 3, the entire Democratic National Committee storyline where it looked like the party was trying to hamper the election opportunities of Bernie Sanders. And I think those are 3 storylines that are not in question. People recognize that WikiLeaks had a contribution to that. I did something before I came on tonight. I made a couple calls in the intelligence community. I had one interesting response I want to share with you, Sean. One of the big intelligence sources I talked to said, listen, we've said all along we're confident Russia did some hacking in the election. We didn't say they were the only ones that hacked. And I think that was the first sign in any time I've talked to someone in intelligence that there might be some room.
All right. What's really, I think, important, and it's interesting with Chelsea Manning now, and you factor that into this equation. Right. And I've been to the Ecuadorian embassy. It's a tiny space. He's holding firm. He believes in his principles. He said to me that he says, I'm reporting things that people need to know. There is a real danger, and you and Sarah Carter are probably at the forefront of investigating this, and that is, I thank God for intelligence, as we saw in Barcelona earlier today, against ISIS and radical Islam and against Iran and China and Russia and all these countries. They're not our friends. They're not our friends, and we need to know about dangers that we may face. We give them the most powerful tools, but if those tools are turned against the American people, and used against the American people illegally because we have laws that prevent that. That's a very dangerous scenario. What about the IT guy of Debbie Wasserman Schultz that got 4 counts today charged with?
Yeah, very interesting, right? There's a lot we don't know in that case as well. But this is a gentleman that worked in the IG department, had access to congressional computers, congressional secrets, possibly her DMC email, and he's now been indicted on 4 charges, mostly related to bank fraud and other questions that have come up. But there's a lot of new information that I'm hearing in law enforcement circles that they're developing about what he did at day, at night, and I think they're looking at some possible connections to other activity besides the charges that were filed today. And I think we're going to learn a lot from the Capitol Police, the FBI, in the coming months about that case. That's a very open and uncertain question about what happened to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's emails.
It's going to be interesting to see what Dana Rohrabacher came back with, and I think the American people need to know the truth. And I'm calling on Robert Mueller tonight. He is investigating supposed collusion. He has a duty to find out what that information is. And the same thing with Congress. The Republicans are in charge. They have subpoena powers, investigative powers. They need to do their job because this has been 11 months long, no evidence yet presented. Thank you, John Solomon. Keep up the good work. When we come back, Democratic hate reaching a new low. State senator under fire. Why? Hoping the president gets assassinated and will not apologize tonight. Secret Service, I hope you're watching. Welcome back to Hannity. So in the wake of the horrible violence in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend, many on the left have become so totally unhinged and unfair. And one Democratic Missouri lawmaker actually said that she hopes the president of the United States, President Trump, is assassinated. And that's not all. The Economist, The New Yorker, 2 magazines are now featuring covers equating the president to the Ku Klux Klan. And then there's the Reverend Al Sharpton. He's now calling for the Jefferson Memorial to be defunded. Take a look.
When you look at the fact that public monuments are supported by public funds, you're asking me to subsidize the insult of my family.
Jefferson had slaves.
And I would repeat that the public should not be paying to uphold somebody who has had that kind of background.
Here now with reaction, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, former Trump Transition Team Executive Committee member, and he's also on the National Committee for Diversity, the Reverend Darrell Scott. Geraldo, because we're the 2 sinners here, we got to go to the Reverend first. He prays for me every Sunday, he told me.
That's appropriate.
And you got to pray, oh, yeah, thanks a lot. He's got to pray for you, too, okay? So the 2 of us together, because we're best friends. Reverend, I look at those covers, I hear assassination attempts, and you know, there were many times in the Obama years, and I have all the tape to prove it, I said, we must protect our president, must, and our elected officials. This transcends all politics, but it's getting worse every day. What's your reaction?
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's also despicable what that lady said. She had no business calling for the assassination of the president, and she's supposed to be a public figure. She needs to resign, or she needs to be impeached, or whatever it takes to get her out of office. Yes, and arrested and interrogated by the Secret Service. And now Al Sharpton and others, now they're on that slippery slope that the president talked about. They're skating on that slippery slope because everyone wants to disassociate themselves from America's racist history. But you know what? And I heard this today from a young lady out of Detroit, Christine Barr, a Twitter friend of mine, Facebook friend of mine. She made a very powerful statement. If you really want to, as a black person, you really want to disassociate yourself from America's racist past, then you need to quit the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party was the engine that drove racism in America. It was the engine behind the Confederacy. It was the engine behind Jim Crow laws, segregation, black code laws. It was the engine behind all of the racial injustices that we experienced. So if you really want to disassociate yourself from America's racist past, disband the Democratic Party.
Bill Clinton's mentor, J. William Fulbright, signs on to the Southern Manifesto. Robert Ku Klux Klan Byrd, you know, Hillary's mentor, you know, filibusters the Civil Rights Act. I mean, this is, you know, you're going to take down the 56 Monument Street schools named after him. Geraldo, I want to ask you this, especially about the assassination call. Madonna, I want to blow up the White House, or I think about it. Johnny Depp, when's the last time an actor thought, you know, assassinated a president? You know, Robert De Niro wants to punch him in the face. And I can go, I did all the examples last night. I don't have time.
Sean,
when do we start arresting people?
Well, that's my point. I have zero tolerance for people who, whether the president is Barack Obama or Donald Trump, I have zero tolerance for those who allude to the murder, the assassination of the president of the United States. That is a crime. If you mean it, you're going to go to jail. And I think the best cure for it is to have two hulking Secret Service guys go visit this state senator and say, pardon me, ma'am, what exactly did you say? What exactly did you mean? How do we know you weren't serious about this? How do we know you're not a plotter? I think there's a line. I am all for the First Amendment. I'm all for freedom of speech. But when you begin threatening the life of the commander-in-chief, of the president of the United States, I have zero tolerance. Sean,
should they be arrested? You're a lawyer too. You're a friend and a lawyer.
They should be arrested.
Well, I have. I want to send that un abrazo to the law enforcement folks in Spain tonight. You reported at the top of the show, Sean, but they killed 5 ISIS suiciders wearing suicide belts in a town just south of Barcelona. So they got 5 of them, killed 5 of them in Cambril. They killed another one in the outskirts of Barcelona. That's 6. They have 2 in custody from the main bombing in Barcelona. So while tragically 13 innocent civilians were killed and dozens more were grievously injured, the Spanish authorities have hit back hard at ISIS. And the reason it's relevant to this discussion about monuments is simply this. When you think about ISIS, aside from their crimes against humanity, there's also their crimes against culture, their crimes against history itself. They've destroyed the historic city of Palmyra, for instance, in Syria. They have destroyed archaeological ruins everywhere, artifacts everywhere. They've turned them to dust. Why? Because to ISIS, what those historic sites represented was anathema. It was counter to their strict, sick view of the Muslim faith. There is grave. I'm not comparing ISIS to the people who want to tear down Confederate monuments. I merely say this. There is grave danger when you start to rewrite history based on contemporary feelings. We cannot go there. Now, if a city wants to remove a monument, and that's what the majority say, then you can do it in a democratic
fashion. I got to take a break.
Okay.
And I want to hear everything you have to say. And Reverend, I was just thinking, because I've been to your church. I know how amazing it is. And I know you preach all have sinned and fallen short of the glory, especially me and Geraldo. You can chastise us. But can't you tell the truth about people? The good, the bad, the ugly? Can't you tell it all? And I want to ask you that question when we get back. We'll have more with Geraldo. Reverend Darrell Scott right after the break.